I was really just about to call it a night. And then, of course, little Marco decided he wanted to run his mouth about something that he doesn't know anything about whatsoever. Now, in case any of you are wondering what I'm talking about, there was this article about Univision anchor Jorge Ramos being quote unquote detained and released in Venezuela after an interview. Now, one second while I make a quick adjustment here. Okay, there we go. All right, so Jorge Ramos from Univision was interviewing Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, and the line of questioning got how much we would expect from MSM garbage outlet. I mean, everybody knows who Univision is, right? There we go. See if I can get this just right. One of the single most corrupt news organizations on the planet. They lie, they manipulate, they do everything that Fox and CNN does, but they do so with a level of impunity that is breathtaking down there. They are hip deep involved in so much corruption that it would take me hours to cover it. But there has been, one second. Let me get back on track here. Okay, so Jorge Ramos was detained for 2.5 hours. He was not arrested. He was not charged with a crime. He was not cuffed. He was given his equipment and he was allowed to go on his way. So Marco Rubio decides to go out and make this huge big deal about this. And not realizing that the US is tied for 5th as one of the worst places to be a journalist in the world. In fact, we have detained a Cuban journalist, and we have detained an American-born in Louisiana, Iranian TV journalist indefinitely. And supposedly, this story here is the end of the world. I want to get down to Marco Rubio's quote here. It's just epic. His tweet, I should say. As of 7 p.m. tonight, the hashtag Maduro regime detained a U.S. journalist because they didn't like his questions to the dictator and were firing tear gas. It's ridiculous. This is an arrogant regime that feels invulnerable and is now acting with total impunity. Yes, if you go into a situation where you say, I'm going to ask these questions and that questions, and then you backtrack on that, more than likely, you're going to have your equipment confiscated. They're not going to let you just put out any piece of garbage and manipulate the truth. Seriously, it's just beyond the pale in my mind that DC can talk about this being something inappropriate, given everything that's gone on with Univision in the last 10 years. Seriously. Give me 1 second. I'm just catching up on the comments here. Sorry about that. Okay. But yeah, there's absolutely no standing whatsoever for there to be anyone talking about this detention, because it was only for 2 hours. And we've still held these two indefinitely, one of them with no charges since January. And of all of the places that Time has named to be a bad journalist? Number one, Afghanistan. That's DC's involvement. Syria, DC, once again. Mexico, that's kind of ironic, where Univision is based. Yemen, once again. Saudi Arabia in cahoots with DC. And we are tied for 5th with India as the worst place in the world to be a journalist. I do not know, one second, how this guy on the left still has a position. If this is really how corrupt DC is, that someone who's not a member of the State Department, who's a sitting senator, can travel to a region, go into to collude with criminals to invade a country, a sovereign nation, that has asked specifically to not be, that up until this last weekend had open borders. Anyone who wanted to leave could leave. There were no Americans being held. The leader of that country never has threatened us one time. The issue with the expropriation of the oil rigs was taken care of in a court of law. An international arbitration court heard that problem with ConocoPhillips and Venezuela and PDVSA and ruled for ConocoPhillips and gave them $2 billion. Where in the world do these people think that they're going to take this story? This is a nation that, if you even don't want to make the allegation about Iran threatening us, okay, Iran threatened us, absolutely. They've threatened us multiple times. Okay, whether they have a good reason or two or not really the issue. I suppose you could probably just go ahead and say, well, because they did that, that's the case. That we are going to make them an enemy. Same thing with North Korea. This issue with Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia, we see this word dictator thrown out all over the place. Dictators don't stand for elections, fraudulent or otherwise. Dictators don't give interviews to newspapers. Dictators don't really care about public opinion. Dictators don't just allow you to leave their territory whenever you want to. We are and have been in collusion with an actual dictator, the king of Saudi Arabia, for decades and decades and decades. And this president, duly elected president in Venezuela, detains a journalist known to be corrupt for a mere 2.5 hours. And that's the only time Fox has talked about it all day, this entire issue. This is how corrupt they are. The night before the former administrator appeared on Univision, he gave the network owner's wife a UN appointment. And now all of a sudden Marco Rubio is feeling sad for Jorge Ramos. It's mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. How in the world, this is sometimes why I don't go live, because this stuff gets me angry enough that I can't even think about the right things to say. But I wanted to cover this and cover it quickly before anybody backtracks about what they said. So anyway, I'll let you guys make your own judgments about this, but it's pretty clear who the bad guys are here in this. We have detained journalists all over the place, detained them without charges, detained them without even telling them why they were being detained. And in the case of this one, look, I'm no giant fan of Iran, but this woman was born here. This is a U.S. citizen. I thought this was a country that had due process. Oh, wait, I forgot. It's take the guns first, due process second. This whole new paradigm with the way due process is now just a secondary kind of thing. Due process eventually. Due process at some point down the line. So, anyway, I won't take too much more of your time, giving the time of night it is. But anyway, Marco Rubio needs to go, people. There was a petition. If you go to the Florida Maquis YouTube page and go to the communities tab, there is a post where you can sign a petition to have him removed. I think it's pretty clear that he no longer has any concept of what his duties as a public servant are. I mean, maybe Washington, D.C. has a different standard for the servant-employer relationship, or maybe they've forgotten that it is a servant-employer relationship. And this is one of the things I don't think that many people realize about how powerful the states really are. Tomorrow's video is going to be about, I've talked about governing ourselves as 50 states. It's not about seceding. There are things that states have to do to maintain themselves as a union. All they have to do is stop doing those things. For example, there is no law, no constitutional provision that forces any state to have an election for president. They're not required to do it. They can send electors and tell them to do whatever they want to do. That electoral college meeting that happens, that was part of such the headache a couple of years ago. There is no law that says that any state has to even conduct an election to send those electors. Just don't. Don't send the electors. Don't do anything to participate in any federal event of any kind. What are they going to do? Are they going to try to force aid into a state that does that, and then when they don't, they're going to tell lies about them? Over at Patreon, I think instead of we're doing the psychological operations training at the subscriber side here for $5 a month. But over at the Patreon, the Florida Monkey Patreon, what I think we're going to do is we're going to start doing videos each week talking about each state in particular and why it could stand on its own. Because every single one of the 50 states in the Union is more financially strong than many, many, many countries in the world that operate every day independently. In fact, California would be in the top 10. Florida would be in the top 20. Texas, I'm sure, would be right up at the very top. So anyway, I will leave it there. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you next time.